Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 790 for the 26th of November 2023. Richard Saunders coming to you this week from Pier 39 in San Francisco. It is a beautifully sunny, crisp, clear day, and in the background you can hear some of the famous sea lions which lounge about the giant pontoons down here. They're a major tourist attraction. Not so many today. I think the tourists are outnumbering the sea lions. Nevertheless, here they are. And I look over to my right, I can see the beautiful Golden Gate Bridge, the entrance to the San Francisco Bay. I keep turning around and there's, right in front of me, Alcatraz, the famous prison island from many years ago. Now, of course, another major tourist attraction. Well, what's coming up on the Skeptic Zone podcast this week? We're going to start with an interesting piece I found in the Skeptic magazine. It's been reproduced. A rough guide to spotting bad science. And these are 12 points to keep in mind when reviewing scientific findings in the media especially. And I go over these 12 points with the aid of our reporter, Adrian Hill. Following that, it's part 2 of the conversation I had with Fraser Cain and Brian Dunning about general skepticism, the round table. And discussion continues. It was a wonderful hour or two I spent with Brian Dunning and Fraser Cain. After that, it's an interesting report from Susan Gerbic, who is currently in New Zealand, heading towards the New Zealand Skeptics Conference. Hello, I think a fish must have swam by. The sea lions are getting very excited. Susan takes the long train ride down New Zealand, then catches a ferry from the North Island to the South Island. Follow her adventures. It's a way to whet your appetite for meeting Susan at the Australian Skeptics National Convention, which is next weekend in Melbourne. Still time to get your tickets, and if you do go, please say hello to Susan Gerbic. And to round off the show, back to the Trove archives, where we're going to be looking at references to telepathy. And what I found very interesting about reading this week's Trove was that how stories, tales, reports, anecdotes, things you hear get reported as fact. Please keep that in mind as you're listening to Trove. All the stories, the wonderful, amazing stories you will hear are being reported as if they were fact. And all these decades later, we know that these things were simply a fiction. I think another fish must have swam by, or sea lions are getting excited about something. I think I'll wander over there, then I might look for some fish and chips. Fish and chips down here along the piers in San Francisco. While I do that, fish and chips. No. What am I talking about? Clam chowder. Famous for clam chowder. I'll find something. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Now on the Skeptic Zone podcast, especially in the Book of Tim segment, you'll hear Tim Mendham say that you can download all the back issues of The Skeptic, the journal from Australian Skeptics, at skeptics.com.au. And of course you can. And what I discovered I could do many years ago was I downloaded all the back issues, which are in PDF, and I put them all on my iPad. So in the Books app on the iPad, I have a folder and it has all the back issues of the Skeptic magazine for me to reference, peruse, read articles and do some research. And I was, thumbing through, I guess you could say, some old issues, some issues from not so long ago, and I was reading volume 42, number 1 from March 2022. And I came across something Tim Maynard had put in the magazine from Compound Interest 2015, www.compoundchem.com. And this is a flyer, a reference sheet. It's called A Rough Guide to Spotting Bad Science. And it's a handy little guide. And with the aid of Adrian Hill, I thought we would read the 12 points this makes about spotting bad science. A rough guide to spotting bad science. Being able to evaluate evidence behind scientific claims is important. Being able to recognize bad science reporting or faults in scientific studies is equally important. These 12 points help you to separate the science from the pseudoscience.
Number 1. Sensationalized headlines. Article headlines are commonly designed to entice viewers into clicking on and reading the article. At times, they can oversimplify the findings of scientific research. At worst, they sensationalize and misrepresent them.
Number 2. Misrepresented results. News articles can distort or misrepresent the findings of research for the sake of a good story, whether intentionally or otherwise. If possible, try reading the original research rather than relying on the article based on it for information.
Number 3. Conflicts of interest. Many companies will employ scientists to carry out and publish research. Whilst this doesn't necessarily invalidate the research, it should be analyzed with this in mind. Research can also be misrepresented for personal or financial gain.
Number 4. Correlation and causation. Be wary of any confusion of correlation and causation. A correlation between two variables doesn't always mean one causes the other. Global warming increased since the 1800s, and pirate numbers decreased. But lack of pirates doesn't cause global warming.
Number 5. Unsupported conclusions. Speculation can often help to drive science forward. However, studies should be clear on the facts their study proves and which conclusions are as yet unsupported ones. A statement framed by speculative language may require further evidence to confirm.
Number 6. Problems with sample size. In trials, the smaller a sample size, the lower the confidence in the results from that sample. Conclusions drawn can still be valid, but larger samples often give more representative results.
Number 7. Unrepresentative samples used. In human trials, subjects are selected that are representative of a larger population. If the sample is different from the population as a whole, then the conclusions from the trial may be biased towards a particular outcome.
Number 8. No control group used. In clinical trials, results from test subjects should be compared to a control group, not given the substance being tested. Groups should also be allocated randomly. In general experiments, a control group should be used when all variables are controlled.
Number 9. No blind testing used. To try and prevent bias, subjects should not know if they are in the test or in the control group. In double-blind testing, even researchers don't know which group subjects are in until after the testing. Note, blind testing isn't always feasible or ethical.
Number 10. Selective reporting of data. Also known as cherry-picking, this involves selecting data from results which supports the conclusion of the research, whilst ignoring those that do not. If a research paper draws conclusions from a selection of its results, not all, it may be guilty of this.
Number 11. Unreplicable results. Results should be replicable by independent research and tested over a wide range of conditions, where possible, to ensure they are consistent. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. That is, much more than one independent study.
Number 12. Non-peer-reviewed material. Peer review is an important part of the scientific process. Other scientists appraise and critique studies before publication in a journal. Research that has not gone through this process is not as reputable and may be flawed. So there we go, a handy little guide, as published in the pages of The Skeptic, the journal from Australian Skeptics, to spotting bad science, or as it calls itself, a rough guide to spotting bad science. And it's just one of the thousands upon thousands of little gems you will find in the pages of The Skeptic magazine. And why not do as I did? Go to the website at skeptics.com.au, go to the journal section, and there you can download the entire back catalogue of the magazine, easily put it onto your iPad or other tablet or in your files, and the entirety of this magazine, going back over 4 decades, will be at your fingertips.
Hey, Adrian.
Hi, Susan. Out for some shopping, eh?
Yep, I'm stocking up on this imitation maple syrup from Australia.
Imitation? Imitation? No. You need to buy the real thing from Canada.
But I saw the TV commercial and it said that noted pancake eating expert Richard Saunders says it's the best maple syrup money can buy, and 60% of people preferred it in a blind taste test. Everyone knows it's the best.
Oh, come on, Susan. You know better than that. That's the argument from authority.
It is?
Or is it the argument from popularity? It might be another logical fallacy. I'm not sure.
Really? If only we had a way of finding out.
Hello, everyone.
Oh my, it's the skeptical fairy godmother angel from the internet.
Yes, that's right. But how did you know who I am?
I listened to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Also, didn't you used to be the tooth fairy?
Oh, yes. I remember you. I'll never forget your left upper lateral incisor. Would you like it back?
No, it's okay. You keep it.
Hey, skeptical fairy godmother angel, what are you doing here in the supermarket?
I've come to tell you that you can find out about 40 different logical fallacies on YouTube in one handy location. Listen to each one to hear an explanation and examples of how they might be used.
Oh.
Just go to tinyurl.com/logicalzone and you'll find all the logical fallacies with Michelle Bickersma with handy time codes to get to the exact one you want.
Who is Michelle Bickersma?
Oh, just a friend of mine.
tinyurl.com/logicalzone. Thank you, skeptical fairy godmother angel. I guess you'll disappear in a puff of smoke and thunder now, eh?
Not quite yet. I have a bit of shopping to do. Susan?
Yes?
Where do I find the Australian maple syrup?
What? No. Come with me, so-called skeptical fairy. This is real maple syrup from Canada. Made with real maple.
Hi everyone, I'm Fraser Cain, I'm the publisher of Universe Today, and I have gathered together 2 of my favorite members of the skeptic community, Brian Dunning, Richard Saunders, they're right here.
Hi.
And I have been thinking a lot about the role skepticism plays, scientific knowledge, scientific literacy. How can we navigate and help other people navigate this world today? And so I wanted to just ask them a bunch of questions, free-form thoughts about this. How much of it is disingenuous then? How much of it is people who are true believers trying to find other people to believe with them?
Oh, a lot of
how much of it? Okay, and then how much of it is people who are not true believers and are scam artists and are trying to take advantage of people?
I don't know what the percentage is, but I'll give you an example of and I'm just writing a big report about this at the moment. There's a system called bioresonance scanning. This is a sham health system, right? The idea is you hook yourself up to, you hold electrodes or you put something on your head. It feeds vibrations from your skull or your body into a computer, and the computer can analyze your complete health situation.
That's amazing.
I know, right? I'm going to invest in one tomorrow.
Yeah. I have questions about my health.
So imagine if you could, and we've seen this in operation. You sit there, you sit down, you put these things on, and on the screen, you see an image of the heart and a scanning, like Dr. McCoy in Star Trek, a scanning thing goes on your heart, goes bing, 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 and shows, oh, look, you've got a pathogen here, you've got a parasite here. This machine has analyzed your heart, your liver, your kidneys, your lung, your skin, and it'll send frequencies back through and zap them.
Oh, so it diagnoses and cures.
Yep. And so you're sitting there and you're watching and it goes bing, bing, bing. And then, oh, what's this? Oh, it's your DNA. And this is what's going on. Okay, so whoever...
They're rewriting your DNA.
Probably.
Yeah. How could you not?
So here's the point. Whoever created this knew full well what they were doing.
Right.
And this is marketed primarily to naturopaths who, by and large, don't have the scientific wherewithal and the medical understanding to know that they are being sold a load of baloney. Right?
That there's no way that you could get there from the placebo effect.
You can't accidentally invent something like this.
Right.
Now, the naturopaths who buy it and go to training and learn how to use it, they think it works. They think this is technology they don't want you to know about. Why isn't it used everywhere? Well, the doctors don't want you to know about this because they'll lose money. And they sincerely believe this. So their patients come to their clinic, sit down. The patients don't know. They're told what the naturopath, they believe in the naturopath. They look at this machine and they say, oh, that's amazing. You're fixing my liver. The point I'm making in the report I'm writing, apart from this as being an obvious scam from whoever invented it, is that these machines cannot detect the cancer that's growing in you.
Right. So if you give a test with a person who has cancer and you say,
you're fixed, you're okay.
You're okay. And in fact, you've got cancer.
And you got cancer.
Yeah.
And 2 years later, you go to a real doctor and they say, well, gee, if we only saw this 2 years ago,
Yeah. In my mind, it doesn't matter so much if the person selling it knows that it's a scam or if they don't know it's a scam. Who knows what's in their mind? What matters is that you as the consumer have enough general science literacy that you can recognize, begin to recognize, or at least separate some of the hooey from the reality.
Yeah.
Because that's where the difference is made, is in your self-protection. There's always going to be people coming at us to sell us things. Doesn't matter what their motivation is. Mm-hmm. What matters is whether we buy it or not.
Yeah. And as a skeptic, when you confront people with beliefs, their response is very rarely, thank you for explaining.
Has that ever happened to you?
Thank you for, I've had a couple of situations.
Yeah.
But it was a person who was kind of on the fence, a person who had heard from somebody that this thing was true and was already predisposed to appreciate my answer. And so it was sort of disaster averted. Mm-hmm. But in general, it feels pointless. It feels hopeless to me.
To them, it is.
It's not only hopeless; it's often counterproductive.
Yes.
Whoa.
You're going to create more pushback.
You're going to get more walls.
Yeah.
And at a minimum, you're going to ruin what might have been a nice personal relationship. If you get into this with your friend,
Yes.
you're going to lose your friend.
Don't do it.
My advice for people: I don't get into arguments with people. Someone believes in something weird, go for it. I just keep my mouth shut because I've learned that there's just no upside 99% of the time.
I mean, I think any skeptic, anyone who even thinks skeptically, or anyone who just feels the need to kind of mansplain this kind of thing to people, has just been there.
Yeah.
But then you get into the dragon in the garage very quickly. People will unwittingly will start to go down there to protect, because we all protect our point of view.
Right.
Yeah.
But I there's a lot of call-in shows, skeptical call-in shows where they let the people come to them and present their evidence for whatever their belief is, and then they will then...
You mean like Matt Dillahunty?
Yeah, like Matt Dillahunty will do with his shows and things like that, right?
Yes.
And I think that's like, you came to me. Like I wasn't, I didn't overhear you talk about what your star sign is, and then interrupt you in the middle of your wonton soup and give you a hard time.
You make an excellent point, because when I've been in situations, because I'm reasonably well known as a skeptic in Australia, but that's just the way it is. People will come to me in social situations because they know who I am and start to say, "What about?"
Yeah.
And I always say, "Oh, I'm happy to tell you, but just remember, you came to me." And because they get upset easily.
Yeah.
When I won't buy into their arguments or whatever.
So have you guys had death threats?
Oh, all the time. Many.
Yeah.
Years ago, I got one from... I was on a forum for water divining.
Yeah.
And someone got particularly upset with me and threatened to do things to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that was pretty strange.
So we're science communicators. People say something that we feel that there is insufficient evidence for. We explain why we're unconvinced by the evidence, and the response is usually angry, aggressive. Like the feeling that I get most of the time is very vicious, is the response that I get from people. I never get, this is your opinion, I have the feeling, It's like, it often is very clearly emotional, to the point that, we've had death threats, right?
Yeah.
Like that's as far as it gets. And like, we're dudes. Like, when you think about some of our colleagues, female colleagues,
have a terrible time.
It's even worse.
Oh, much worse.
Right?
Much
Terrible.
worse.
And that is, I think, what's that about? I have no questions. For me, as a skeptic, I have decided that it is not worth it to have these conversations with people, even when they come to me on my channel. I just say, hey, it's not for you. Hey, I will say, I am unconvinced by the evidence. This might not be the channel for you.
Yeah.
Go find a channel. That's
more and more I'm doing that.
Yeah, because I just don't want to have the conversation, because it is unproductive.
It's unproductive.
And it makes me feel bad. How do you get up every day and put on your armor and go into these conversations? Like,
I mean, my show is one-way communication. All right. I mean, I put out a podcast and people can listen to it or not. There's no comment section. I put out information that's as good as I can, making as good an argument as I can, and showing the benefits in as positive a way as I can of understanding the reality of this question, whatever it is I'm doing that show about. So I don't get a lot of death threats directly from episodes of the show. What I do get is people emailing me all the time saying, my mom / coworker / friend believes in this. Do you have an episode about this that I can play for them to change their mind? And I always say, yeah, I do, but don't play that for them.
Right.
Because all you're going to do is create a problem. You're going to get into it with them, and they're going to dislike you. They're going to distrust anything else you have to say to them on the topic. Instead, here's this episode that are about milder topics that everyone is generally on board with, or that's just about some interesting science question. Play that for them instead, because they're going to be very receptive to that. And then maybe they'll get interested and want to hear another episode. And maybe they'll want to get interested and hear another episode. And eventually they'll work down toward, they'll start to build an appreciation for the value of going the distance and finding out what's really going on with a question. And they may come to the solution on their own, or they may finally come to that episode. They'll be much better prepared, much more receptive for it.
Next week, in part 3 of this series, Fraser, Richard, and Brian discuss being wrong.
Hello, this is Rob Palmer. You may have heard of me. Lately, I've been interviewing scientists, skeptics, and other critical thinkers from around the world for my column in the Skeptical Inquirer, and recently, some for the Skeptic Zone. My written interviews have included Jay Novella from The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, mass psychogenic illness expert Robert Bartholomew, Celestial Ward from Squaring the Strange, psychic-busting Private Eye Bob Nygaard, skeptical activist Michael Marshall of the UK, and even secular activists Bailey Harris and Jean Delancey, that's Q from Star Trek. I even interviewed, believe it or not, a magic dragon, and another really well-known skeptic, Richard Saunders. You can find my online column with these interviews and more by Googling The Well-Known Skeptic plus Skeptical Inquirer. Also, follow me on Facebook at The Well-Known Skeptic. Cheers!
I think we need to think. Here's Susan Gerbic.
Well, I'm starting out on my next adventure. I am on Kiwi Well, and it is Thanksgiving Day for America here in Thursday, but in New Zealand there is no Thanksgiving. So I'm about to embark. I'm all by myself now. I spent the last couple days with Craig and Susan Shear. Craig is about to be a past president of the New Zealand Skeptics. And now they have put me on this train. I'm in Auckland, and I'm going to go down to Wellington, which is the capital of New Zealand. And that should take about 8 hours or so. It's a full day. Nice train. It's a tourist train, so we'll be able to see out of the windows. It's huge windows, beautiful. And so I'm in the northern, Auckland is pretty much the biggest city, North Island of New Zealand. And so I'm going to be going down to the bottom of the North Island in Wellington. I'm going to be picked up by Mark Honeychurch and a couple other people. We're going to go over we're going to take a car that's going to go onto a big boat that's going to take 3 hours to go across the Sound at midnight. So then we're going to drive through the night and get to Dunedin, which is close to the south of the South Island. So I will be showing up at the conference about 5 o'clock, right when they're getting ready to start the conference. So this should be fascinating. So I'm on this train all by myself and a bunch of other people. So it looks like it'll be nice. It's a beautiful day, 7 in the morning. Wow. What a life. Hello everyone at the Skeptic Zone. I am exhausted. That train ride I took was 10 hours or more. It was so tiring, you guys. It was just sitting and looking out the window. It was beautiful in New Zealand, but it's green, there's sheep, and there's cows. And that's what we saw for 10 hours. There was moments that were absolutely gorgeous. Then I got picked up and after a few hours taken to a ferry. That's a real thing apparently. And we had to wait there for a while. We got there at 1 a.m. and I was with Mark Honeychurch and a couple other people from the New Zealand Skeptics on their board. Then they put us in a little cabin where we slept for 4 hours or 3.5 hours. And about 4:30 in the morning, we were waking up because we had to get the car across from the North Island to the South Island. Oh my gosh, it was such an ordeal. I mean, it went smoothly and everything, but I'm just exhausted from lack of sleep. And so we got out about 5 a.m. from the ferry, crossing over, and we started driving, and it was from 5 a.m. till 5 p.m. in the backseat of the car. And they're wonderful people, but 12 hours after another 10 hours. Anyway, the New Zealand conference is just going to be amazing. I got to my hotel room and showered and cleaned up, and it's only a block or so away where I go to the meetup tonight, and it was at Magic Moments. No idea what that is. I'm in Dunedin, which is in the almost southmost point of the South Island. And I started a couple days ago in the almost northernmost part of the North Island, which is Auckland. And we passed through Wellington, which is the capital of New Zealand, and passed by Christchurch. And now we're in Dunedin. And we had our meetup tonight. It was like a Skeptics in the Pub, and there was probably 40 people there. It was wonderful. So many people I have met in the past, and so many new people I had not met yet. Melanie and her husband Anthony were there, and they look like they're having a great time. They've been in Dunedin a few days longer than I have, and I'm so excited. This is going to be a blast. We had a trivia quiz tonight, and my team got 4th place, which was pretty darn good. We did really good. We had logical fallacies, and there was mass psychogenic illnesses and urban legends and all kinds of stuff. It was so much fun. It was done by Mark Honeychurch, who did a phenomenal job with the trivia. And we hung around and had a great time. And now it is Saturday. No, what day is today? Today is Friday. Friday, the 23rd, I think. Or maybe it's the 24th. I don't know, you guys. I'm really tired. And I'm working on my talk because I have to get up in the morning and I'm going to do my talk. And it is going to be a little bit of Wikipedia, a little bit of psychic stuff, and a lot of bit of we need to work together. And then I'm leading off the conference, 9 a.m. tomorrow. Then I get to sit and just relax and listen to other people's talks. I will be soon, because at the Melbourne conference, plus I'm also going to be in Brisbane with Melanie, and also in the Sydney Skeptics in the Pub. I'm looking forward to that. I am going to be doing much more extensive talks in the Melbourne conference, and I will be doing much smaller talks at the conference, at the Brisbane and the Sydney Skeptics in the Pub. But you can sit and talk with me as long as you can handle it. You can still get tickets, I understand. Please go and get yourself your tickets and come out and see me. And Melanie, I mean, my gosh, Melanie, you're going to have a great time. So I hope to get more of these little first-person narratives out to you. As I said, I am so tired. I've got another hour at least before I go to bed because I've got to re-practice this lecture that I'm doing tomorrow. And then I'm up again in the morning. Oh my gosh, you guys, this is so much fun. But it really is tiring. I'm meeting so many great people. Come out and see me here in Australia. I'd really like to meet you there too. Bye-bye.
You've probably heard the saying, knowledge is power. While that's true, there's just too much to know. Plus, we carry access to nearly all of humanity's knowledge in our pockets. Unfortunately, there's also a lot of misinformation out there. Conspiracy theories, propaganda, pseudoscience, science denial, all of which are effective because they appeal to our biases and emotions. As Richard Feynman reminded us, no one can fool us like we can. Protecting yourself from misinformation requires better thinking. When you need reliable information, do you know where to find it and how to use it to make wise decisions? And importantly, are you aware of the thinking errors that might cause you to fall for misleading information? The bottom line is, knowledge is not enough. Thinking is power. I'm science educator and communicator Melanie Teresa King. Please visit thinkingispower.com to learn more about critical thinking, information literacy, and science literacy skills. Educators can find useful and engaging course materials and assignments for their students. And for a daily-ish dose of better thinking, follow Thinking is Power on X, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
Now it's time once again to dive back into those pages at Trove, at trove.nla.gov.au, where hundreds and hundreds and thousands and millions and billions and trillions of newspapers, well, not that many, have been digitized for your convenience. Yes, all you have to do is go there, type in your search, and merrily look through the articles in reference to whatever you want to find out about, which I do quite often. And this week, we're going to look at general references to telepathy or telepathic. It's the term that used to be used before the general term now of psychic. Telescope, telegraph, telephone, television, telepathy. And we start with the Daily Telegraph, dated the 20th of February, 1940. 6th sense isn't always nonsense. A Sydney woman saw a vision of her foster son when his ship, the Teroa, I think it's pronounced, was sunk by the Graf Spee last December. And to let you know, the ship in question, the German ship, Admiral Graf Spee, Deutschland-class cruiser, was a Deutschland-class Panzerschiff nicknamed a pocket battleship by the British, which served with the Kriegsmarine of Nazi Germany during World War II. We read on. He appeared before her, midnight eyes, dressed in blue overalls. She has now learnt of his rescue from the raider Altmark off the Norwegian coast. This experience is not exceptional. Scientists now believe that some people are genuinely telepathic. Telepathy is the exchange of thoughts between two persons without material aid. Orthodox physics cannot explain it. Yet experiments prove that it happens. Largely owing to the work of scientists at Duke University, USA, telepathy has achieved scientific status. Dr. Ryan and his associates at Duke University tackled the problem on a statistical and experimental basis. They organized the sending of more than 10,000 telepathic messages varying from a few yards up to 250 miles. They treated the results statistically and found them much too positive to be accounted for by pure chance. In one series of 2,500 messages sent, there were 869 satisfactory results. The Lund University in Sweden has now established a chair of psychic research, the first in the world. The new department at Lund University will investigate automatic writing, ghostly manifestations, clairvoyance, and the gift of prophecy. People once scoffed at the idea of firewalking, but controlled experiments by Indians and scientists at Carshalton, Surrey, in 1937, set all doubts at rest. And stopping quickly to say, of course, firewalking is now very well understood from a physics point of view. There is nothing mystical, magical about it. It has also been demonstrated that some people can see with their eyes shut. Another comment from me is that there are many ways magicians can do this quite successfully. Banachek, for example, does a great routine where his eyes are taped shut and bandages put around his head, and he can still drive a car down the Las Vegas Strip. Professor C.E.M. Jode blinded Kuda Bax with dough, bandaged his eyes, and watched the Indian read from books selected for him from an extensive library. Again, that's sounds like the typical illusion, the typical trick. In the same condition, Kudabax played an excellent game of billiards and rode a bicycle through London. Well, there you go. He obeyed traffic signals without hesitation. Well, that's good to know. A London businessman, Mr. Theodore Kolb, proved that he possessed the same gift and actually described blindfolded a series of impromptu sketches. Telepathic phenomenon has been very successfully studied in identical twins. They can often anticipate each other's thoughts and actions, and there are several amazing records of spontaneous injury appearing on one twin after the other has been accidentally injured. At Patricroft in Lancashire 4 years ago, Thomas Stocky was struck in the eye with an axe. Good heavens. His brother William's corresponding eye immediately swelled up in sympathy. And now let's look at the world's news from 1952 on the 27th of September. Things that science can't explain. The mystery of telepathy. 1 out of every 5 people has this strange power. It could be you. By Dr. J. H. Ryan, Director of Parapsychology Laboratory, Duke University, North Carolina, USA. Scientists no longer ridicule the idea that it is possible for one person to pick up thoughts from another person's mind. There is plenty of laboratory evidence to show that some individuals, about 1 in 5, have some telepathic mind-reading ability. You or your next-door neighbour may be among them. This knowledge doesn't remove all the mystery that surrounds thought transference, however, and the evidence we have doesn't mean that 1 person in 5 is a, quote, mental marvel, end quote, of the type Dr. Bernard Rice of Hunter College, New York, USA, discovered. He found a girl who was able to name accurately, and all in a row, every symbol on a set of 25 cards. She did this while sitting in her apartment a whole city block away from the spot where he was located. Dr. Rice looked at the cards, one by one, and as he concentrated on them, the girl recorded her guesses, apparently by reading his mind. Usually, the ability to receive and send thought messages, discovered through experimental tests, is very small, and judging from stories people tell us, we suggest that we get only a trace of their full ability in these tests. 1952. A good friend and associate of mine told me recently that his father was driving his car along a New Jersey road when he suddenly was seized with a violent pain in his chest. He had to pull to the side of the road and wait for the pain to stop. Then he drove home, and just as he finished telling his wife about the incident, a telegram arrived. It reported that their son, in Colorado, had been killed in a car accident that afternoon. His chest had been crushed against the steering wheel. Since the father had no trouble with his chest before this or afterward, this case seemed to be one of telepathy, the type we can call community of feeling. In another instance, my neighbour's wife threw down a perfectly good unfinished bridge hand, quite rudely, one day at the club. She rushed to the telephone, as though summoned, and called her maid to find out about her baby's safety. The call was made at the very moment that the maid was rescuing the baby from strangling. He had fallen head foremost and was struck between the body and the baby carriage and the handle. I find it impossible to dismiss these stories told me by two people I know well. They are examples of types of thought transference with which you doubtless are somewhat familiar. Have you ever started to look up a friend's telephone number and immediately heard the telephone ring? Breaking in here quickly to say, we now call this reporting confirmation bias. We read on. Was the person on the other end of the wire perhaps the person you intended to call? Have you ever written a letter to someone and found that he was writing to you at exactly the same time? These everyday cases are not packed with drama and could be coincidences, but they happen so often to so many people that they can well be manifestations of thought transference. Occasionally we are told of some experience that seems even stranger than fiction, which also seems to show some evidence of telepathic power. One of these, reported by a sincere, intelligent woman and corroborated by her father, deals with something that happened when she was 14. This girl, her father, and 2 dogs were in an upstairs den in their Long Island home one evening. The girl's mother, who was suffering from a nervous disorder, had taken a train for New York. About 10:30, the father and daughter heard a moaning outside and the mother's voice calling for one of the dogs. "Sport! Sport!" They rushed downstairs to the door, let the dogs out into the garden, and started a search. They naturally assumed that the mother had returned and was in trouble. Then the telephone rang. The superintendent of nurses in a hospital in New York was on the wire. She said that the mother had been seriously ill when she was met at the train by her maid. She had been taken to the hospital where she started calling repeatedly for sport. A much more casual experience, reported by Luther Burbank, the great plant breeder, shows his reliance on a power he believed he had in a day when many people scoffed at telepathy. He says, "I inherited my mother's ability to send and receive telepathic communications. So did one of my sisters. My mother was in poor health during the past years of her life. During this time, I often wished to summon my sister. I never wrote, telephoned, or telegraphed her. Instead, I sent her message telepathically, and each time she arrived at my home on the next train." It is the hope of all men and women now carrying out researches into telepathy that we, someday, may be able to learn how to control and develop the small degree ability we now recognize in some people and make them usable powers. This may take a long time. Of course, it is now 75 years since science first started to investigate the capacity, and 68 years since this report was written. We read on. Many important scientific men were a part of the venture. Many experiments were carried out in many countries. Steady advances were made. Today, a telepathy test, here at Duke and at other universities, usually is performed with two persons located in different rooms in the same building, in two different buildings, or in two different cities. The sender thinks of one of 5 symbols, usually, selected by chance. The receiver tries to identify the symbols as they are selected by the sender's mind. Time signals make it possible for them to keep in step through a series of guesses. Some of these results have been very significant, well above the required odds of 100 to 1 that such results would not be due to pure coincidence. Some have been mere chance. It is from these figures that we come to the conclusion that some people have telepathic ability, and indeed we suspect that all people do, but it is just a matter of getting conditions right for testing it. It takes one kind of test to tell us that thought transference happens, and another to tell us how. We get help in planning experiments from experiences people have. Take the matter of distance, for instance. Does distance have any effect on telepathy? A very well-educated woman I know, let's call her Dr. C, was in China several years ago. She was awakened one night by a call from her mother who was in New England. It was not a telephone call, but a mind-to-mind message that had travelled halfway around the world. It was simply a loud cry of, "Mabel! Mabel!" But it was disturbing. Later, Dr. C learnt that her mother had called her name on the night in question just before she died. From such experiences, we have been encouraged to try experiments over great distances. Experimentally, telepathy is not hindered by distances of thousands of miles. We have asked ourselves the question, do the sender and receiver need any special kind of relationship or rapport? Most experiences showing thought transference are between people who are closely attached to one another. Other experiments, too, we find that hundreds of wives, sweethearts, or twins, there's twins again, seem to work better together than persons who have no emotional interest in one another. Early hypnotists found many telepathic experiences cropping up between themselves and the persons they hypnotized. The eminent psychiatrist Dr. Pierre Janet of the Sorbonne, France, reported that a patient screamed when the man who had hypnotized her the day before burned himself. This man was in another room, and she couldn't see him, yet she felt the pain in exactly the spot where he was injured. Did some invisible attachment exist? Although knowledge about when and how telepathy occurs has grown considerably, we still are not able to make reliable use of this remarkable power. What holds us up? More than anything else, it is the inability to know when a hit has been made in an experiment or when a spontaneous experience really is meaningful. This barrier may not be insurmountable, however. It has been found from experiences we collect at Duke, and we welcome them all, that many people do know when they have an experience that is significant. A man from the state of Washington writes, "One night when I was a boy on the farm, my mother got up and cooked supper for my brother who was away. My stepbrother told her she was crazy, but she insisted she knew he was coming home. She went ahead, put the supper on the table, and my brother, who had not communicated with us in any way, walked in just in time." A similar case shows another woman who awakened sharply at 4 a.m. and called out, "All right, Mr. Olson, I'll get it for you." Then she got up, went to the sideboard, and got a bottle of brandy. There was a rap on the door. "It was Mr. Olson, a neighbour," she told her husband. "His wife has just had a baby." The neighbour was amazed when she opened the door and handed him the bottle, for he had not yet had the chance to ask for it. If only the person in an experiment could feel as certain about it when he is right as these two women were, we should be able to get 100% accuracy. That's why we are studying personal experiences so closely, hoping to find new clues for better tests. Even then, there is still a great barrier to progress which we must cope with. This is the resistance we encounter from the current materialism that opposes research into these powers of the mind, powers that transcend matter. Well, there we go, from Dr. J.H. Ryan, Director of Parapsychology, Laboratory, Duke University, North Carolina, USA. And let me see again, this was 1952, 68 years ago. I think he's probably had enough time by now. It must be all those silly skeptics getting in the way. Yes, telepathy. Something you don't hear about much anymore. Or do you? Do you hear about it in the subconscious when people are sending you telepathic telegrams? Not telepathic telephone calls or telepathic television, but telepathic thought transference. Maybe they're sending it to you from the 1950s. But you don't need to be telepathic to enjoy the treasure trove that is Trove. Just go to trove.nla.gov.au, type in telepathy, type in telephones, type in telemarketing, whatever you want to do, because you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast this week. I've wandered back to the sea lions after having some lovely clam chowder and, of course, my favourite root beer drink. Coming up on next week's show, more of the discussion with Brian Dunning and Fraser Cain, more from Trove, and, well, who knows what. I often wonder what's coming up on the Skeptic Zone podcast each week, and I have to tune in myself to find out. Thank you to my Patreon and PayPal supporters. Your generous and unfailing contributions means the show keeps going week after week. And I'd like to make a very personal thank you to the patron and one of the founders of the Australian Skeptics, Mr. Dick Smith, a very famous man in Australia, who reached out to me recently to offer some support. And it's good to know he listens to the podcast, and that means an awful lot to me. But for this week, as the sea lions do whatever they do, why don't we wander down? I'll wander across. There are crowds and crowds of tourists here. Let's see if we can get a bit closer. I'm milling through the people, and you can hear them, I think. I don't know what they're talking about. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from San Francisco.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.